This will be a little interesting for me. I don't normally do the startup branding one. I'm not really, I don't fashion myself as a marketer, but what I realize is everything we do is actually create companies from the very beginning. So we're creating companies that basically are nothing more at the beginning than a pure idea. And that idea needs a name, it needs positioning, it needs a story. So there's a lot that we have to do early on, and we don't bring in outside resources because in the very beginning, just like you guys, it's really about what's the story that's in your head? What's the idea of what you're trying to relate to people? And so what I'm going to do, unlike these guys, they've got brilliant videos. I stuck one video in that's not mine, just to kind of an homage to these. But here's what I'm going to do. When you talk about vision, when you talk about your brand, right? What image does your brand bring? If you have a picture, if you have a video, if you have an icon, what's the image that that brand brings to mind? What do people think of when they think of your company? When they see your logo, when they talk to you about what you're doing? What's the message of your company? All right, so if you look at this, does this look like isolation?
Yes.
What would you guys say about this picture? What does this bring to mind? Like, what are the emotions? What's the connotation that it brings?
Depression.
Depression, mental illness, loneliness. So the key word isolation brings all of these messages. I'm going to show you how quickly. I love what Shaheen does with the power of the brain. What I'm going to show you is how easy it is to retrain your brain. One key word. Can you control your brand? This is kind of rolling off the top, sorry. It says, can you control your brand or your message or your image? Isolation is a good thing. In an instant, I can put a picture up that says, this is isolation. And if you think of isolation and you think of this picture, not the other one, I've done my job. Your company can completely be branded by the visuals and the messaging that you create. And that's really what this says. You control the perception, you control the message, and you control the image. People are visual, right? Shaheen said it. There are a bunch of my sayings as well. People make decisions emotionally and defend them logically. You need to elicit emotion to get them to defend your logic. But we see things visually. The way we remember things, the way our brain is, our mind is wired around visuals, pictures. So one of the great things you guys can do as a startup is come up with good visuals. Google Images are great. I joked with Shaheen, I almost used the one with the little picture of the green guy. I try and go 3 or 4 pages down so we don't all have the same pictures. When you guys are doing the startup, you're going to have to do a presentation. You're going to need a PowerPoint. You need to sell your story long before you have a story. You need to sell your product long before you have a product. But what you're really selling is the emotion tied to what you want your company or your brand to be. And in a minute, when I say isolation, this picture pops to mind, not the one before. That's what you want to control. Right? So branding is about what images and messages you can control early on. And some of them are really simple. Again, the great news with early startups is you can have 3 or 4 messages. You can have 3 or 4 brands. You can get a lot of feedback. Say, here's what I think my logo is going to look like. I mean, I love what Steve did. We've got the same thing. I've got folders when we're building companies of different logos, different designs. And we test them. We show them to people. What do you think? So work really hard on the visuals and the isolations. The question is, Janine, this isn't working very well. I told you I'm not technical. Can you guys see up there? It says, what's the value of perception? No, because there's a light back there. Can you guys see it? Basically says, what's the value of perception? So here's what I mean by that. Your brand is about the perception of what somebody else thinks of when they think of your company. And the power to control perception is really fascinating, I think. So here's what this says. It says, how would you feel about a company that has a following? I'm going to read off these things. I'm not a big text-heavy one, but this one's pretty interesting. Here's a company that's the most valuable company in the world. One of them. It's valued at $87 billion. It had a profit of $19 billion. It's sitting on $76 billion of cash. It employs 50,000 people and makes almost $2 million per employee. Most of its employees are overseas, 90% of them, not even in this country. Its product is 30% higher than anybody else. It has an amazing 75% market share and pay less than 2% taxes. Watch perception. If I told you that company was Shell, what would you say? What would you guys say? Would you say they're evil, right? Profits, 2% taxes, outsourcing employees, billions of dollars in cash. That company's evil. The company I just gave you was Apple. Most valuable company in the world. 90% of their employees out of this country, 2% taxes, $19 billion in profit, and you think that company's cool because they worked hard to build that perception. You have to learn to control that message, because no matter what you do, if you see that and you think that's cool, you're going to pay more for that product. That's what you've got to learn how to do. That's what branding is. When I looked at it, I'm like, I don't know branding. No, I know emotion. You need people to like and trust your product. You need them to think that your product's cool. You need to think it's sexy. You need to think it's powerful. If it's healthcare, it's beneficial. If it's children, it's good for kids. You need to control what you want them to think, so when they see your logo, you control that message. And you have a chance to do it in a startup. It's a blank slate. But if you get it wrong, it's hard to get it back. The difference between success and failure is really small. Again, that's why I did that perception. Shell, Apple, when you go through the numbers, it's really, really different. So what's the power of words to sell? Here's my ode to these guys. I'm going to run a video. I've always wanted to use this particular video, and I don't normally do presentations like this, so I think this is a perfect time to do this video. I'm going to show you guys a simple video on the power of words. Okay? Let's see if this works. It's only a minute and a half long.
I wrote the same, but different words.
All right, guys, sometimes it's that simple. Okay? The idea of how do you create emotion around things that are really simple, that whole video is 90 seconds long and had probably less than 15 words. All right? But the power of words to sell, the power of words to move people, that's what a brand is about. So, half of my topic was devoted to brands. We're going to switch gears. Here's a little segue. It says, what are these people doing? If you were to guess, what are these people doing? There's no right or wrong answer. What are these people doing? Rock climbing, mountain climbing. They're climbing a mountain. You're right. Well, but wait a minute. What else are they doing? Exercising, having fun. They're not only climbing up a mountain, they're rappelling down. Again, you have to control your message. The point of this one is, when you decide what your message is going to be, you can tell it all the time, and it's not always going to be heard the same way. All right, I'm going to give you one example. This is one of my favorites, and I do this. And if you've seen this, I apologize, but this one to me is always fun. So, Shaheen, you want to do this with me? Sure. All right, come on real quick. All right. So here's what's going to happen. I just gave Shaheen a song. He's going to knock on the table the song, and I want you guys to guess what it is. Just knock.
I'm really good at this, so you'll
Okay, go. Okay, good. Thanks. What's the song? Any guesses?
I'm not even sure I know anymore.
See, here's the problem. This is what every one of you think you are when you're talking about your company. You're a rock star. You in your head know what you're saying. It was "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn?" In your head, you hear your song perfectly. When you're talking about your company, this is what you think you are. Your audience is just like every one of you going, "What the hell was he doing?" Half the time people guess happy birthday because that's the only song they can think of. All right? So what you got to realize is when you're talking to people, when you're trying to figure out your message, in your head it's perfectly clear. Excuse me, but to other people, they don't quite get it. You know, so it's kind of the dumbing down of America. Right? Be very careful with what we call acronyms, alphabet soup. Right? We have companies, and each one of them, each industry has their own acronym. We have one company that's a software as a service. It's an SAS and an ASP and deploy, you know, and we've got another one that's environmental selling to CSRs, and everything's these acronyms. When you talk to people, just be very careful of what that message is you're trying to convey. Find a way to say things simply and clearly and easily. Does that make sense? So here's the transition. These are a couple little resources. This one just says, it doesn't matter how many resources you have. If you don't know how to use them, they'll never be enough. So it's all about tools. There's some great tools out there, a lot of free resources. You guys have probably heard of these, and there's a bunch of them. The great part about the internet and technology is there's a lot of things that are free. There's other things that are very inexpensive. A lot of resources. USPTO.gov. I know part of the situation and part of this exercise was naming, you know, patents, trademarks. How do you determine whether there's a trademark? USPTO.gov is the site where you can go and do a lot of research. It's free. It's the government one. 99 Designs if you need a logo. SurveyMonkey if you need a survey. Odesk, Elance. These are just great little resources. So learn how to use resources. If you're going to do naming, if you're going to do branding, if you're going to do messaging, use a lot of the tools that are out there. Haro, who knows what Haro is? 1, 2, and you guys are both the entrepreneurs. The rest of you don't know. Okay, here's the deal with Haro. Haro's free. It stands for Helper Reporter Out. If you sign up for Haro, here's what's kind of cool. The good news, you get 3 or 4 emails from the guys every day. The bad news, you get 3 or 4 emails every day. But Haro in the morning comes out and says, hey, if you're a life science company, here are the 8 or 10 reporters looking for stories. If you're e-commerce, if you're services, if you're healthcare. So these are reporters who are looking for stories. Haro's just a great resource. Just scan through it when you can and ping an email off, and sometimes you'll get picked up in a story for free publicity. So Haro is totally free to use. You get publicity, you get access. All of a sudden there's some credibility that starts getting built around your messaging. But again, make sure you have your messaging right. And then from a naming standpoint, as you guys come up with names, there's a bunch of domain generators out there. I don't know if you guys have seen them. There's NameStation and Domain Fellow. You can put a name in and it'll give you a bunch of different variations. You know? So the idea is when you're coming up with a name, and again, we have to do this. I mean, every company we have is basically an idea. So there's different types of names. What type of name do you want to be? What's your fill in the blank? And I put a couple up just to give you an example. Number one, try and get something close to what you do. We may or may not be able to do it. For instance, we have one Rona Star. None of this is meant to be self-aggrandizing. These are just easy ones to use because I know them. Rona Star, return on net assets. How many people know what Rona is? Hardly a couple people, accountants. We have a software that we sell to CFOs. The accounting term for CFOs is called Rona. You talk to a CFO, they're like, oh, this is a Rona program. Absolutely, it's a Rona Star. Outside of that, people don't know, we don't care. Our market isn't other people, our market is CFOs. ComCom Network stands for Community Commerce. So can you find something that is close and describes what you do? That's one type of name. Another type of name, something that you make up. Combining, creating. So we had a company initially called Ad Snips. And it was a little ad snip and it described exactly what we did. And the problem was we realized talking to our customers that we couldn't sell ads and we had to come up with a different name. So I created a name called Cineplex. Here's what I did, just to give you an example of the type of research. There's a couple of these on here. There's another one down here I'll do. Cineplex. Cineplex is a combination of two things. Cino as a prefix means something new and unique. Plex is a suffix which means a combination of many things. So I took a prefix and a suffix, stuck it together. The other thing I did was I got enamored with trying to come up with something that was bigger than Google. So how many of you guys know that Google was supposed to be Goggle, the name Goggle, but they sort of screwed it up? And does anybody know that? So the genealogy of numbers, million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, centillion. 10 to the 100th power is Goggle. 10 to the 303rd is centillion. 10 to the infinity is Goggleplex. Those are the genealogy of the numbers. I took centillion and Goggleplex and combined them to say Cineplex is a word bigger than Google. Because we have a company that we're doing inventory that we think is bigger than Google. I'm like, screw you guys, I'll come up with a name that means bigger than Google. But here was the point. It no longer said we did ads. The reason this was important was going into customers, they don't know what a Cineplex is, so I had a blank slate to create the message I wanted in my customer's mind. This told them we did ads. This, at first, they thought was an infectious disease or a cinema. They weren't quite sure, but it didn't matter because they didn't have a preconceived notion. Spoonmantics, we took something called spooning and romantic, combined it to kind of mean a name. So come up with something that you make up, something that tells a story. You know, we have one, My Wet Rock, My Wet Rock is about Earth. Hang on, see if I can come back online here. My Wet Rock is about Earth. It's not Third Rock, it's a wet rock. Moneta Pro, again, something that tells a story. Does anybody know what the first form of currency ever was? Salt, coal. First type of portable currency. Salt, good job, thank you. It was shells. First form of portable currency was shells, called cowrie shells. And the cowrie shells' actual type were called moneta. So the word money comes from the word moneta. So we created a company called Moneta Pro because we were doing a currency platform. Orion Nation is allegory. This is about celebrities. It's a celebrity platform. It's a constellation of the brightest stars. Sirius is the brightest star in the universe. Orion Nation is the constellation with the most brightest stars. But the name Orion is interesting because he was a god who was put up and struck down by the gods because he had too much hubris. To me, I thought that was kind of funny. We're helping celebrities and we think they're all full of shit. You know, so allegory, it's like, how do you come up with names that mean something? Either directly, something you make up, something that tells a story. And it doesn't have to be exact. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at Realtor.com, anybody heard of Realtor?
Yeah.
How many have heard of Zillow? More people have heard of Zillow than Realtor. This doesn't mean anything. That Zillow doesn't mean house. Zillow doesn't mean anything. But to Zillow, it means money because Realtor.com nobody goes to and Zillow does. Books, this is one of my favorite. We used to own the domain booksellers, sports sellers. We thought we were so smart in the late 90s. We had all these domains, and I was on a TV show, and I was in front of Jeff Bezos because we had virtual sellers with all these domains, and Jeff was just the guy doing the bookstore called Amazon. Books.com nobody's heard of. Amazon, I think Jeff's done really well. And cars, you know, versus, mail.com versus that, cars versus Cars Direct, Auto Trader. See, this shows you don't need something that says exactly what you do if you get the messaging right and get traction. All right, but pay attention to how you do your names. Oh, that came up there. There you go. Last slide, I think, is the brand. Branding's hard. All right, these guys will attest to it. I mean, we have brand people we eventually bring in, and they fight because, all right, Stephen, you don't understand the brand. You need all of these elements and all these positions. They're right. But at the beginning, when you're a startup, it's up to you to decide what you want this to be. You know, just like with Steen, I loved his line. You know, you've got different cars. And where do you want to go? Oh, I want to be on this side of Ferrari and this side of Aston Martin. I want to be in that gap. You know? And he's not alone in that. One of the most brilliant ones I read recently was, well, recently is 2 years ago to me, was Bentley. Bentley did this research, and my guess is they did just like Steen, and they probably had this little graph up and went, wow, we've got these Mercedes and BMWs here that are 70, 80,000. And then there's this huge jump up here to the Ferraris at 220. Look at this gap here for a $160,000 car. Oh, let's put a Bentley there. And the Bentley GT Coupe fell right in a gap where nobody was. I'm sure they sat around and whiteboarded it out. So this brand positioning has a lot of things that are intangible, but a lot of things are tangible elements that you can put together and put together early on. So figure out your messaging, figure out your names, what do you want to be? Oh, and I'm going to leave you with this story, because again, I'm better at stories, I'm not good at branding. Nobody in here's heard the story about the hard-hearing frog, have they? Because I didn't do it last time.
I think you did, but I forgot. So
all right, guys, this is more for you on the entrepreneurial side, all right? This has nothing to do with my topic. I just wanted to throw the story in. Here's the story of the hard-hearing frog. One day a bunch of frogs, and I'm not good at storytelling, sorry. So one day a bunch of frogs are hopping along going home, all right? And they're up on a little ridge, and their buddies are going, and one of them pats his other buddy on the arm and says, knocks his buddy down, and he falls down the hill, and he falls in a big bucket of milk. The frog's in there trying to jump and get out, and he's looking up, and all the frogs are looking down at him, and they're going, oh my God, what are you doing? It's like, I can't get out. And he's like, you know, flapping his legs, and all the frogs are looking down going, you can't make it, just give up. Right, because he's in milk, and the frogs don't have arms, they can't help him. The frog's flapping and flapping, he keeps going, and they're just laughing at him, saying, you're not gonna make it, give up, just quit. And he's flapping so hard, all of a sudden, the milk, anybody knows what happens to milk if you start? Whips and turns into butter and gets a little solid, and all of a sudden there's just enough solid under his, bounces out of the pail. And all the frogs are like, oh my God, I can't believe it, what happened? It's like, what? They're like, how'd you do that? We kept saying you were gonna die, just quit. He's like, what? I thought you were cheering me on. This is going to be hard for you guys. People are going to tell you you can't make it. It's not going to work. Just be a hard-hearing frog. Just keep plugging along, and eventually you'll jump out and you'll make it. So that's all I got. Thanks.
We're going to take some questions now, but I also want you to, if there's anything on your assignment for naming and branding that you don't understand, that maybe the mentors could help you with. So let's bring that into the equation too. So questions for Stephen.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. All right, go ahead.
What would you suggest? Do a realtor.com thing or a Zillow.com if your realtor isn't out there?
I don't know, because I've seen both work. I think it's more, what's your messaging, what's your brand, how do you connect with your audience? I mean, look at, I can't say look at Icon because it doesn't mean anything. Icon's an icon, so seeing it great, but Tesla's got this great name behind it with Elon and all this publicity, and they've gone public, and these guys have more, you know, following than Tesla. So I don't have an answer.
Not to have an association almost?
Well, no, because that's why I put Cars.com. Cars.com has done well.
Okay.
You know, there's certain ones that have and others that haven't. So the point I was trying to make is it doesn't matter. You know, if you can't get the exact name you want that does exactly what you do, it doesn't matter. Just find one and then build your brand and image around it. Other questions? Yeah.
Well, I actually have the opposite problem. I think I know what I want my brand to be. I just can't figure out the name of it. So, like, I know what I wanted to convey and how I want the experience to be, but I just can't come up with something that's cool and that is, like, easy to,
Right.
yeah, catch. So.
And that's, I mean, that may be more like an allegory. I mean, for our celebrity one, we're looking at all these different things, and it was word games, and we put things on a board, and then it was about stars, and then it was, you know, what stars, how are stars bright, and then we're researching, you know, astronomy, and then I learned that Sirius is the brightest star, and I'm like, oh, well, Sirius is the brightest, which one has the most? And then we came up with the term Orion, and then it was like, well, what do we do with that? Because there was always Orion pictures that had failed. And then we looked at Orion and nation, and if you look at the definition of nation, it's a conglomeration of people. So just play around with different words. You know, look at Wikipedia, look at thesaurus, and you can come up with something that in a combination hasn't been taken already, and then just build the story around that. Yeah.
How critical is it to get the .com when you're launching? Is something you can buy later with?
You know, it depends on if you're forward facing or not, I guess. Like some of our companies are enterprise software. Nobody's even ever going to go to the website except our 12 customers, so it doesn't really matter. If you're a consumer facing company though, it probably makes more sense. And then, I don't know, with the mobile apps anymore, it's even more confusing because a bunch of people with the mobile apps, you've got a .mobi or an AU, or you've got Bitly, so now you've got the .lys. I don't know how much it matters anymore. You know, because I think it'll probably come down more to positioning. If your name's in, where's it going to show up if somebody's trying to find you? I don't know, but we struggled with that with a couple of the names. We couldn't decide what we wanted to do, and a couple of them are .mobis because they're going to be mobile apps, and we're still not totally comfortable with it. Other questions? See, guys, I either did really good or really bad. That's what I said. Sales and marketing. I told Janine I'd jump in on this one early, but anyway, go ahead.
I have a question. I mean, there's two presentations by Shaheen and by you where he was saying, you know what, guys, don't really brainstorm it. You gotta be simple, and usually if you already have it, when you start into researching, you kind of lose the track, and you come up with a name that sucks. So when do you stop? I mean, how do you know that that's what it is, and what's the best techniques except of looking at the different names and trying to combine it? Like, is it brainstorming that works well? Is it like, I mean, if you're trying to come up with a name for 2 years, is it good enough or not good enough? I mean, that's.
If it's been 2 years, the name's going to be irrelevant. You know, but it's,
I'm just giving you an
right.
example.
No, but at some point you have to come up with a name for the company. You know, and again, guys, it's hard. Like for us, My Wet Rock, we've really struggled. It's an environmental consumer product, and we've struggled whether that's the product or the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some people say I need a different name for the brand, and that's the product. And I've had other. You're going to get a lot of feedback. At some point, you just got to listen and figure out what feels best, but you got to pick a name. You can always change it later. I mean, we've changed. Orion Nation was originally called StarBiz. Cineplex was originally called AdSnips. You know, Rona Star was originally called 2Exchange. We've changed along the way, but at least find one that you can kind of get started with. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm curious about My Wet Rock. I researched you a bit beforehand and thought, oh, this is so cool. I read all your marketing, and then
There's nothing there.
there's nothing.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is, and this is interesting for us, so My Wet Rock's a product, but the product's not on the page.
Mm-hmm.
It's hidden behind password protected. And the only thing on the My Wet Rock website is just a bunch of marketing material on water and statistics and doesn't tell anything. The reason for that is my customer, the people we're selling the Wet Rock to initially, are corporations. JP Morgan, Ford. I have a password protected site because I need JP Morgan to go in and look at what I'm doing. I don't need anybody else to. So we're not consumer facing, so for me to have anything out there that everybody sees is irrelevant to me because it's not my customer. You know?
So as long as the customer that you're looking for, the JP Morgans, resonate with the marketing material, then you can try to sell to them.
Right, so behind there's a password for investors and another one for the product. With the password behind the product, we have videos, we have narrated PowerPoints, we have the PowerPoint non-narrated, how we came up with the idea, the actual product, the characters. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's behind the scenes. But again, we're not consumer facing, so it doesn't, I don't need to show what I'm doing because I'm not there. As long as I get to my customer, my end customer is a large corporation, we're talking directly to them, we're giving them access to the site. You know, so it's a little different. A lot of stuff I do is not, you know, facing out to the consumer that way. But it is funny because people go to my Wet Rock, they'll go, oh, I went to your website, it's so cool what you're doing. And I'm like, we're not doing, it's a bunch of statistics on water. So there's nothing there. So when they say that, you're kind of, you know, it's a little bit of a filter. It's like the people in LA that go, oh, I know that guy, and they really don't. So, anything else? No, one more? No? Okay.
Okay, so let's take our mid presentation.